And here we are. This is definitely a session that I was completely waiting for throughout the day, and it's finally here. The session is called VAH Women, inspiring stories from three women about whom we can only say Vava. On a serious note, don't miss out this session for their take on leadership challenges as a woman. I do have Kanika Radhakrishnan, who's the CEO of EVLG. Kanika graduated from Harvard Law School. She's a patent attorney and also a member of the California Bar with over 20 years of experience. Kanika, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gunjan. I couldn't wait either to moderate this panel. Greetings, everyone. I'm delighted to be your host tonight for this panel discussion on VAHA Women today. For those of you who are wondering what VAHA means, VAHA is actually a Hindi word that loosely translates into super women. And I must say that the track title is very apt, given that this panel is full of super women tonight. I can assure you that while we may not have the ability to fly, we certainly have an ability to soar, and we've proved that. Welcome to the panel, ladies. Let me start by doing a short round of introductions of all of us. Thanks, Gunjan, for introducing me. I will introduce Dr. Jale. Dr. Jale is...
Call me Jale. No need to call me doctor.
Okay, great. Jale is a Women in Tech Hall of Famer, keynoter, and strategic advisor. She's a multidimensional thought leader with wide-ranging experience in private and public sectors. An investor, board director, advisor, and noted academic biologist, she served on the administrations of 3 presidents, worked in 8 countries, and has received numerous awards. Jale's board service includes the UN World Food Programme and the US Space Foundation. Currently, she is partner at Aurora Equity and the founder and chair of Ag Food Tech at Band of Angels. Next, we have Anjali Bansal. Anjali is the founder of Avana Capital. Avana Group is a fund and ecosystem platform that provides capital and scaling to support exceptional entrepreneurs who are leveraging technology and innovation to catalyze impact and financial returns. She is a former non-executive chairperson of Dena Bank, and she chairs Niti Aayog's Investment Council for Women Entrepreneurship. She's an active investor and a mentor in companies like Nykaa, Urban Company, LoanTap, and Darwin Box. And she serves on the boards of several leading companies such as Tata Power, Siemens, Kotak, Piramal, and Delivery. Hema Hatangadi went to Karnataka University for her undergrad, and she did her MBA from IIM Kolkata. She joined a company called Enercon Systems, which was a family business that she grew. And in 2009, she spearheaded the exit of this company, later called Conserve, to Schneider Electric. She's also an author and an advisor to Takshashila Institution, which is an independent think tank. She's also the co-founder of an alliance called the Energy Efficient Economy, which is an industry-led initiative to bring industries and service providers in energy efficiency together. Finally, we have Kerry Rupp. Kerry is a general partner at True Wealth Ventures, which is an early stage VC fund investing in women-led businesses, which are specializing in consumer health and sustainability. She also teaches for NSFI Corps, helping university-based research teams identify commercialization opportunities, and sits on the Texas Health Catalyst Advisory Board at Dell Medical School. Previously, Kerry was CEO at Dreamit, a top 10 US startup accelerator and VC fund. She's also the founder and CEO of the travel company Holiday Go Lightly, and held VP positions at allrecipes.com, Jobster, Classmates.com, and LexisNexis. Kerry graduated from Duke and Harvard Business School. Thank you once again, ladies, for making the time and joining this great panel. And while we've had some great sessions preceding ours yesterday and today, I'm pretty sure this one will be the showstopper. So I thought we'll run this panel discussion a bit differently and start off with personal stories and anecdotes from our lives that brought us to the leadership positions that we are currently in. with a particular focus on the kind of challenges we faced along the way as a woman. I'll start off with a couple of personal anecdotes of mine that vividly stand out in my own life story. One is from my law school days in Delhi when I had just graduated with my LLB from Delhi University and had secured admission to the prestigious LLM program at Harvard Law School. I was scrounging for financial aid and funding. This was way back in the 90s. And I remember approaching several endowments and agencies for financial assistance, and vividly recall approaching a particular person at an endowment in Delhi and being told that as a woman, I should be proud that I got into Harvard, and I should carry that as a badge of honor for the rest of my life, should actually bury the dream of actually making it there. I think that was really one of the first times when I felt in my life a conscious bias against me being a woman. Fast forward 20 years, and this situation that I'm about to describe plays itself over and over again in the Silicon Valley. So while the countries have changed, the biases have not. And ever so often when I walk in to meet a prospective client and we go into a conference room with a male associate of mine in tow and we sit down and meet this prospect, the client will more often than not start making eye contact and conversation with a male associate, assuming that he's the managing partner. Until such time, he throws a glance at our business cards and figures out who the boss is. So conscious bias, unconscious bias, it's all there. And I'm sure all of us have felt it at some point of time in our lives. With that, I'll shift the focus to Jale first. Jale, please help us understand your leadership journey and what the impediments were along the way.
Well, thank you first for having me. I'm delighted to join such superstars that you've put together. I looks like I'm the oldest one of you, so I have longer stories to tell and more of them because of my age. What I have to say first so that the audience would know, I grew up in Iran, which is Asia, so not very different from the culture that an Indian woman, for example, may experience. But amazingly, as a child, as a young woman, all the way to high school, I never felt that women would be different in terms of education because we took the same math and science classes that the boys took. So I did not know that there was a women in science issue, totally ignorant. So I come to California, I go to UC Davis, and the first thing I realized, there are no women in my department, very few. And in terms of faculty, zero women faculty. Whatever women were there were either the staff or the technicians in the lab, the different professors' lab. So, but that didn't register. I didn't think there was an issue. The first time I faced an issue and realized there was an issue was when I was doing my postdoc. I'm sorry, graduate. I was still in my PhD program. And I had a big grant from National Science Foundation with travel money, including travel money. So I have this great research and I want to go to a conference to present it. It was hot topic. So the conference had invited me. It's a prestigious conference. I'm nobody and I get this invitation from this conference and I want to go. So I had to pay for part of, they paid for my airfare, but I had to pay for hotels and things like that. So I go to my department chair to get it approved and he would not sign it, even though it's on my own grant money. And I said, Doctor, I'm not going to mention his name. I said, Dr. So-and-so, why? He said, oh, you're a young woman. It's not appropriate for you to travel by yourself. I make a long story short, and I said, very politely, I'm not confrontational. I said, but it doesn't make sense to me. May I go talk to the dean, please? Get his opinion. And as soon as I mentioned I'm going to talk to the dean, he backed down. I mean, I didn't know that that was a trick. I was sincerely was going to go talk to the dean to find out what the rules are. I mean, to me, it made no sense that I've come from Iran as a young woman. So what's the point of not going to Boston, Anyway, he backed down and I ended up going. And that was a major push in my career, actually. Because when I did present that research, people realized that I'm doing good work. Had I not been able to go there, nobody would have known about my work. So that's my first one, and I won't tell you the other ones. That's just a goodie for the first. And I realized there are issues with women. That's when I realized it.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jale. Hema, now you are someone who made it in an all-male bastion. You're a woman in a technical field running a technology company. And then let me tell the audience something unusual. Hema not only had male reportees in her company, but the male reportees included people like her own husband, father-in-law, brother-in-law. So what kind of challenges did you face, Hema, as a woman leader?
Yeah, thanks, Kanika. First of all, great to be with all of you. And let me tell you a little bit about my backstory. So actually, I married into the family that founded Conserve. It was called Enercon. And my husband is Ashok, and his father were brilliant designers. And the business idea of using digital meters for energy conservation was already way ahead of its time. For me, in the beginning, when I joined the business, there wasn't all that much to do. But life got exciting pretty soon. We went into fifth gear when the marketing agency that we had, which was from the extended family, they ended the contract to brand and sell our products and started competing with us overnight. So we suddenly woke up one morning, we find we have bills to pay, loans to repay to the bank, great products, lovely product designs on the drawing board, but no sales force and no brand. So around then, luckily for us, we were discovered by India's first private VC fund, venture capital fund. And a little bit later, when Ashok's dad decided that he wanted to take a step back from operations, Ashok was made the MD for a year, family business. So, oldest son, he gets to be the CEO. But he was miserable because he's an archetypal designer. He's been called an engineer's engineer. And all he wanted to do was design products. And he wanted no truck with HR and payroll and stuff like that. So he goes to the chairman, T. Thomas, and tells him, why don't you make my wife the CEO? Now, that's a thing that you don't see a lot of men doing, right? So that's what gave me the entry into a leadership position at this family business. So that was the easy part, accepting and saying yes at the first board meeting that I would love to become the managing director was the easy part. What happened at that meeting was the chairman turns to me and says, Hema, you have a very simple mandate. Just make this business profitable and make it professional. No pressure there. And around that time, my son, who was just 15 months old, it had become very busy, new mom, new CEO. And we lived very close to the factory where childcare support was non-existent. And this is when I learned, it's a lesson for life, that it made sense to be a good listener and a learner when those wiser than I were speaking. It wasn't very easy to get to that point, but I learned quickly enough. Now, one of the role models that I came across was a woman called Rebecca Mathias in America. And her company in a book of the same name, Mother's Work, that became my Bible because she grew her business to $500 million in a few years, got her husband to leave his job and come and work with her. And she had 3 children. The business was doing well, the family was doing great. And she was somebody that I kept looking up to. I would quickly go to the executive summaries at the end of each chapter to figure out how did she do this. So when I took over the business, there were obviously lots of things to do. The first thing was to transform the culture, which was pretty feudal, family setup, had to turn it into a professional one. Wasn't easy. As you pointed out, I had the male relatives in the family reporting to me. Ashok was not the problem. He had put me there. But as you can imagine, dinner table conversations were not easy at all. But we, sort of lived with the situation. And when things got better at the business, it became so much more easier to find credibility and respect. The tougher challenge, I think, was finding my own voice and my leadership style. First-time leader, what style do I adopt? So I was diffident and uncertain in the beginning. I had to stare down a lot of fears. But I must tell you that the one thing that really helped me, and I think this is a lesson for all the male managers and leaders listening in, is that the support that I got from Ashok and T. Thomas is finally what kept me going. And, Kanika, when I was listening to your story about you being the managing partner and you go and this customer is not looking at you, your client, he's looking at the male guy and the male colleague with you, that I think that happened to me like once a week when I would go on sales calls. And I would sometimes want to walk out, but this would be some really big dude, in a public sector corporation or something, a director level. So I learned how to start speaking up. And I think when you start talking sense and you have an air of authority around you and you finally get business done, people learn to listen to you. It's not a very pleasant experience, but then you figure out a way of going around that. So when it came to selling products, I had to learn a lot of things, right, about electrical energy, about how these meters work. The toughest part was going into these little retail outlets, distributors sat. The first question they'd asked me was, why you? You are a woman, you're a young girl. So that was one sin, that I was young. I was non-male and I was non-technical. I had a degree in commerce and an MBA in marketing. And here I was trying to sell a technical product. And the cynicism and the derision, and in some cases, I think outright rejection, was something that taught me a lot of lessons. But I must tell you that a lot of these people have become lifelong friends once I went through that trial by fire. So, one of the reasons I pressed on was mainly because it was a question of survival of the business in which the whole family was involved. It wasn't because I was some rock star heroine trying to, brave all odds. Right. Kanika, that's my story.
Yeah. Wonderful. So moving along, Anjali, do you want to share some of your experiences?
Sure. Glad to be here with Ty. It's always fun to be with Ty. I've been a charter member for the last 20 years. So I was listening to everyone speak, where should I start the story? And let me start the story when I went to an all-girls school, so I did not see what it meant to be a minority. We were 15 girls, as we were called then, in a class of 350 in my engineering freshman class. Mm-hmm. It's the first time one felt that, we are really small in number and so on. But to be honest, I've not felt quite that way ever since when it comes to sort of professional avenues. I think my first job, and I say it in quotes, job was in the lab at ISRO. And when you are at ISRO in a lab, it doesn't matter what gender you are. At least I didn't think about what gender one is. You just got on with the work, and it was very interesting work. One knew very little, so there was very little to fail at, frankly. Then came graduate school. Jala, I was struck by what you said. I actually got a scholarship, and I was given a departmental assistantship where I was in charge of the department at Columbia. I don't think being a woman got in the way. It perhaps may have helped. I don't know. And I would say my first shaping experience, which inculcated a sense of gender blindness in me, was at McKinsey. I joined McKinsey & Company in New York doing strategy for largely financial services clients. More often than not, the only woman in the room, but it actually didn't matter. And I think in some ways, I'm very grateful for those early experiences that helped shape meritocracy and a sense of there is a job that needs to get done. The job will need the same doing regardless of what gender you are. So you get on with it. And also giving a tremendous internal network of other women, but also amazing men. So I've worked mostly, and for our generation, there were very few women who were above us and could be champions and sponsors. So most of the champions, sponsors, mentors were men, people who gave opportunities. So in the celebration of wherever one is today, whatever achievement one has, I think it is equally to our family. So I'm incredibly grateful to my birth family. I never had to feel that opportunities are different because you are female or male. Very, very grateful also to my marriage family and the spouse. So we often joke about this, that so much of this is a spousal lottery. Who you're married to is actually a very important aspect for a woman, perhaps even more so than for a man. But having supportive spouses is a critical part of any professional's growth and achievement journey, men or women. Post McKinsey, I moved back to India in 2000. 2000 India was quite different. And perhaps that was a time when one could have felt biases and opportunities. I proceeded to have 2 children. The firm was superbly supportive. My first entrepreneurial opportunity came my way when my younger child was about 1.5, and one was thinking, how do we balance all of this? And then I think the universe and serendipity, there were a bunch of wonderful women in Mumbai, all leaders in financial services, many of whose names are very, very well known. And I did what a good consultant does. I went out and got data. I spoke to 15 of them. And the key takeaway was, whatever you do, make an active choice, not a passive one, not a default. And stayed engaged, had wonderful sort of 10 years. And then I started the Spencer Stewart India practice, ran it, ended up being reasonably successful. Started joining corporate boards. I started the first Women on Boards program in India, got huge, absolutely sort of unqualified support from all the senior board members. And this is before the Companies Act. And at that time, they were all men. So again, I want to celebrate the men, not just the women. And I was chatting with Kanika a little bit ahead of our conversation today. And I think getting to any kind of professional success or achievement, and I still feel I'm on a journey. I haven't arrived there yet. Any kind of professional success or achievement requires all of this to come together, right? You have to work very hard, regardless of gender. You have to be good at what you do. You have to build your champions, mentors, support networks. Yeah, your networks look different when you're male or female. Maybe, I'm not out golfing on Sunday morning, and my men friends will hate me for saying this because many of them don't golf on Sunday mornings either and want to be home for dinner and spend time with their children, right? So I think there are some things which are neutral to gender, and some things, because women have to go through the years of birthing and nursing, are just different for them. But you have to push through. And I particularly, Kanika, you asked me specifically, have I felt that opportunities have not had access to opportunities, or bias in opportunities? Perhaps there were opportunities that didn't come my way. I cannot say I noticed that, because there were enough other opportunities that did come up. And so, being entrepreneurial means taking what you have and making, if you have lemons, you make good lemonade, and you don't say, hey, I've got a lemon. But consequently, later on, I now sit on corporate boards. I've had the opportunity to contribute in multiple spheres. I've chaired the board of FWWB, which is a large microfinance institution, stressed public sector bank, having to resolve that and get to an outcome which led to a merger with Bank of Baroda, and working with a lot of entrepreneurs. But I do, the one thing I will mention is, in our entrepreneurial ecosystem, one does see a dearth of female entrepreneurs and female investors. Absolutely. So I'll pause there and come back with other points.
Well said, Anjali, and we'll get back to those points as we get deeper. Kerry, I want to hear from you.
Sure. I'm going to take a different tack, because I think we all know that we've probably, some of us have experienced explicit bias. I think fortunately that's becoming less rare because it's socially unacceptable, but the implicit bias is really sneaky. And I think sometimes we don't even see it happening to ourselves. But I thought I'd give an example of a structural problem that still exists that actually impedes female success. Now, it's very specific to the industry that I'm in, and I don't want to bore you guys with too many nuances of the rules of venture capital, but I'll just explain a couple of things that just make it really an extreme case of gender bias still happening in 2020. So the current number, at least in the US, where my data is, sort of better, of women venture capitalists who are actually making investment decisions is still in the single digits. So 90+% of venture capitalists who are investment decision makers are men. It could literally be like in the low single digits. The measures are all different, and sometimes it's partners, but the person's an operating partner and they're not actually a decision maker. That number's really quite astounding, actually, when you hear about it in this day and age. And unfortunately, the way venture capital gets funded makes it like sort of indoctrinated that that's going to stay that way. So basically, in order to get funding from the big investors, most of the investment into venture capital comes from institutional investors like pension funds and endowments and, royal families and, sovereign wealth, that kind of thing. They tend to invest only in teams that have what's called an exited track record together, i.e., you have been at a venture capital fund with your partner for a long enough time to have invested together in companies, taken them all the way through to exit, which is, 7-10 years, enough of them to have a track record of that, then you decide to quit your cushy job at that great venture capital fund, start your own fund, and then go seek investment. There are so few women already in these roles. For them to stay that long, work together as two women in the same firm, quit their job and start a new firm is really just, I mean, it's insane to really think about like that would ever move the numbers. But if you're someone like my partner and I who want to start our own venture capital fund without that having worked together for 10, 15 years together, we can only get small checks because the big investors, we don't check the boxes. So therefore, we have to raise a $20 million fund because the SEC has some rules around only 99 investors can be in a fund. And therefore, you're only getting, if you're going to individuals who are willing to write those checks, they're small checks. And so there are lots now, as of November, there was a study, a lot of women, or a lot of new women starting funds that are 5 million, 20 million. And when you compare that to the $1 billion kind of funds that Sequoia or Kleiner Perkins or these other known entities are raising, we're still just a blip. And unfortunately, there's no way to kickstart that cycle because of the structural issues that say, no, you need to have been there already. So we're in a chicken and egg dynamic. So I can talk, at length about like solutions that I think are out there. I'm going to steal a story that I was maybe going to tell later in the panel, but just I think it fits in here. One of the things we found as a fund was to get women to fund women as a way to at least get us, the flywheel started. And I'll tell you that story, that method actually came from Thai. So about 5 years ago, I met with the Thai entrepreneur leader, one of the Thai leaders in Austin, Texas, where I live. And he told me the story in Silicon Valley. The same thing was happening to Indian entrepreneurs who couldn't get funding from the established, frankly, traditionally old white male VC funds. And the way they got their businesses off the ground and started showing a track record of success was to get other Indian entrepreneurs and people in their ecosystem, probably in their families, other successful business people they knew, to fund them. And that started the flywheel and started creating the proof points that Indian entrepreneurs were going to be really successful and they were good investment bets. And so we're going to take that same model. We have 80% of the investors in our fund are women in order to show that women entrepreneurs can be successful and hopefully eliminate the bias issue because the investors can make money. And if the data that exists already in studies doesn't show it, and if their experience with women doesn't show it, hopefully the dollars will show it. So that's just sort of a different take on a structural issue that's impeding women's growth. And maybe a hopeful solution that's based on Thai, which is honestly serendipitous.
Absolutely. Well,
Kanika, can I add to Kerry's view?
Yeah, sure.
I completely agree, Kerry. In fact, I also want to share sort of two pieces. One is we saw this journey in the board space in corporate governance. And now, in fact, I think the SEC is coming out with new rules around public listed companies in the US, which will require a certain number of women on boards and so on. But India implemented this about 7 years ago. Norway implemented it even earlier. When we started tracking percentage of women on boards, we were at about 3.5%. After the legislation, we are now close to 20%. So sometimes it does take the state to step in. And if we don't do the right thing, then sometimes the state does step in. The second piece is, and I'd love to invite you to this, is the Gender Smart Investment Summit. We had a session just literally yesterday, where we discussed exactly this, where capital and decision making around capital allocation is not in the hands of women. At the LP level, at the fund manager level, and consequently not enough capital going to women. Now, there should not be any consequently, but I have to say consequently because perhaps if there were more women in decision making as fund managers or as LPs, then perhaps more capital would have flowed there. It shouldn't actually be causal at all.
I can't agree more. And when it comes to interventions, I think legislative measures or, what we do consciously, just in terms of, building an ecosystem like what Thai is doing can go a long way. But I wanted to take a step back before we even get there and talk about, what the underlying reasons are, because numbers tell the whole story. Here we are talking about our own success stories, but when we actually look at the numbers, I think women start falling through the cracks right off the bat. In India, I was reading a statistic that said, 40% of the life science graduating class in India comprises of women, but only 14% of the workforce that ends up in life science related employment disciplines comprises of women. So which means they're already falling through the cracks right there. So we're not even talking about reaching the higher echelons of power, but right there. And I'm wondering what triggers this kind of a gender gap and gender gulf at that level. And maybe Jale, you can throw some light on it, because I know you have a very interesting term to even describe gender gap.
Yeah, I want to tell you actually the fact that as soon as I started in academia, my first career was in academia. So as soon as I made full professor, which in the US system means you have tenure and you have reached the top of your at least academic rank, so you have freedom. And if you have money from outside, from federal agencies or private foundations, you don't need anybody. So as soon as become full professor, which was actually 6 years, I made full professor in 6 years, which is unusual in itself. I decided that women don't have a voice and I need to do something about it. So I was elected president of the Association for Women in Science, which was based in in Washington, D.C. So ever since, I've been watching these kind of questions that we are discussing. It's a long time. I don't want to date myself, but I would tell you it's been a long time. So there are so many reasons for this gap. And it varies between individuals to institutions, to countries, to you name it. It's very variable. But I want to touch on two major things. The first one that you can attribute it to the system and mostly men is because people keep looking within their own network. And women have a hard time cracking into professional networks in a meaningful way. So, or if you don't go to Stanford and Harvard, if you go to, say, Tennessee State University, that Harvard and Stanford network, which is very powerful, will never see you no matter how talented you are. So that's one systemic issue. But I also want, because I know women are going to be listening to these talks, and I'm a woman that has gone through similar experiences, maybe even more worse because of my generation, is that some women are not willing or not able to make the right kind of sacrifices. Look, being in science and tech is hard, even for men. Can we agree on that? It's not easy to succeed in high tech because they're it's like pressure cookers. So it's even hard for men, but men have support system. So the wife says, okay, I'll take a lower level job, or I won't be as ambitious as you are, so you can be ambitious. So it could come from the woman herself, taking a lower sort of ambition level, or it's because they don't want to make sacrifice. I give talks to a lot of women group. I was at this major corporation that you all are connected to via their products. I'm not going to name name. So I go to that company to work with their younger women, to help them sort of find their ways. So I asked the women, they were in their 20s and early 30s. I said, how many of you want to be a VP by age 40, 42? And all the hands went up. I said, great. So we have ambitious women in this room. That's the first requirement, that you have a goal. You want to be VP by the age of 40. So I said, let's talk about what it takes to be a VP. And I went through the things that in that corporate type environment would help you become VP. Because when you become VP in a big corporation, it's like making full professor at universities. You have a degree of freedom and you're groomed to move into C-suite. And I said, all right, these requirements, one of which is traveling a lot internationally, because this is a multinational corporation. You have offices and stores and whatever everywhere in the world. So, and I said, how many of you are willing to travel as much as men do? Not more, not less. Only 5 hands went up. And I said, therein lies the problem. If you want to be VP by age of 40, you got to make some sacrifices. Men are making that sacrifice, traveling, sitting on a stupid plane, eating a stupid food at airports, but doing what it takes to be a VP by age 40. So I think I just wanted to bring one example that is rooted in individuals and one example that is rooted in the system.
Kanika, can I just chime in here on this?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
No, this is just another aspect that I read. It's probably the same report you are quoting. This was an ILO report I saw about something that we find definitely in India, probably in Asia, the job versus career dilemma. That women are mostly encouraged to have a job based on the convenience of the partner, while men are encouraged to have careers. So they have a long-term approach and can take up responsibilities that women can't. I'd love to know what the other panelists think, but I found this time and again in dealing with women and asking the kind of questions that Jali was talking about. How many of you would like to get somewhere by so-and-so age? There's so many things that come in the way. This particular facet is something that seems to crop up quite a lot in practice.
Absolutely. I think there are really two things happening here. One is, women, some women are probably not propelling themselves enough, just like Sheryl Sandberg says, they're not leaning in enough. And with others, there is just a visibility problem. I mean, we all exist, but maybe we are not visible. Like Jale said, we are not in the right circles. Our methods of networking are different. And I wanted to ask Anjali this, since you work on the board matching program and the Women Entrepreneurship Initiative, is it really a supply problem, Anjali?
So it's not a board matching program actually at all.
Okay.
We don't do that. It's a program we started about 7 years ago, actually well ahead of the Companies Act, recognizing that there are very few women, and it was meant to address this visibility problem. Like many other closed ecosystems, the board circuit is also a bit of a walled garden. Somebody needs to open the door for you. So we said, let's open the door. And my co-founder and I, we just got fed up of hearing that, there aren't enough women. And we said, no, there are enough women. You just don't know them. So let's help you get to know the women who could be on your boards. And we had tremendous response from that. So it's not a board matching program at all. The Niti Aayog Women Entrepreneurship Platform was set up after the GES, the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, with the view that, and there's strong policy support for encouraging women in entrepreneurship through schemes and so on and so forth. But I think what Jale said completely resonates. And I think there is an element of, it's almost sort of 4 concentric circles. There is the individual at the center. There is the family and society around her. There is the organization that she works in. And then there is the state of the country and the system that all of this exists in. Today, the state, for the most part, good countries have done their job. Our laws promote wage parity. They promote good participation of women in the workforce, generally good policies on against sexual harassment, maternity benefits, etc. I think the state has done its job. Good organizations are doing their job. They're putting in place the hardware, the policies, the processes, women's networks, again, support. And women have to go through those 6-8 years of not marriage. Marriage is not a debilitating illness. By the way, neither is maternity. It is a phase you get through. And so most organizations are doing their bit. Society has yet to catch up to some extent, and families have yet to catch up. So we will only get to balanced workplaces if we have balanced households. But ultimately, at the center of it is the individual. She has to want it enough. She has to want it enough to make the sacrifices, and leaning in is gender neutral. I don't know a single man who has not made sacrifices and achieved his full potential either. It doesn't come automatically to anybody.
Yeah.
So why should women say, no, I will not travel. No, I will not work the weekends. No, I will not do the late nights. And yet I want to be VP or whatever, whatever your benchmark is at the age of whatever the age benchmark is. Yeah. So I think women also have to do their bit.
Ladies, we are almost out of time. So I want to just quickly go around the room and ask 30 seconds, just give us a few pointers on what organizations like TAI can do to create an ecosystem that supports and nurtures women entrepreneurs and leaders.
Hold up lots of role models. There's a lot of.
I have a couple of suggestions. They aren't, TAI specific, but one of the things that's been found, at least in the entrepreneurship world, is that when women pitch, they get asked different questions than men get asked. So women get asked what are considered prevention-oriented questions, like how are you going to deal with this competition? How are you going to mitigate this risk? And men get asked opportunities that are promotion-oriented, like how big can this be? What other markets can you be in? And so I think first, if you are the judge or the mentor or whatever in a competition, or if you're helping the team, is one, making sure that the questions actually become equitable and being real conscious of that, like maybe even using a standard suite of questions. And then also training people, like women especially, on how to navigate when they recognize that they've been asked that question, and then know how to navigate it so that they can actually quickly answer the question, but reorient the answer in the promotion kind of direction. Women, I think, have a tendency to be very pragmatic and realistic. I think it's actually why the data shows that they outperform, because they're, quite realistic about their expectations. But I think sometimes they mistake the when to talk about their realistic opportunity and when to talk about the best case scenario, and not thinking that those things are, not consistent with one another. But knowing that when you're in a presentation format, you can talk about if everything went great and we did everything perfectly and the world, the contexts were great, here's how big it could be, is different from the plan that you're committing to with your board with 90x% certainty that you can deliver, and helping people navigate how and when to talk about those things, but also making sure you put structures in place to treat people equitably, and that can even get to the sensitivity level of like asking comparable questions and expecting the same types of deliverables from the women versus the men entrepreneurs.
Wonderful. Anjali?
So 2 points, both on the demand and the supply side. Everything Carrie said, yes, ditto, agree. If TAI can help put in place frameworks for not asking, I'm sorry, but dumb questions like, what does your husband think about you becoming an entrepreneur? Will your mother-in-law support? And which you would never ask a man. And I think we are working on that through various networks, but whether it is women investment networks or just creating more awareness. And I think TAI has such terrific tech leaders who have seen decades, if not years and years of experience. I think that TAI can promote, and it's one of the most inclusive organizations I know. The second is on the supply side, on the women themselves. When somebody has put their confidence and their investment in you, do not let them down. Don't come back to them and say, sorry, I've now decided I have other pursuits in life after you have invested in me. And it's not just as an entrepreneur, but even in organizations, it makes it much harder to fight the good fight. When you have younger women who are in those critical years of their life come back and make choices which are not prioritizing their work.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anjali. Jale?
I totally agree what was brought up, and I would reiterate actually some of the things that were mentioned in a different sort of language. And that is, again, I'll go back to the network. Open up the network, your network. I mean, what I see, my experience is mostly Silicon Valley, so I can't say anything about Austin yet. But my experience shows me that the thought process is so monolithic among these big investors or funders. Open up your network, bring people that have different experiences and thought processes. Thought processes is so important, to have diversity of thought. We talk about race and gender, but even more important, I think, is diversity of thought. So that's the first thing. Bring in people that are different, think different than you do. And secondly, I think make an extra effort to reach out outside your network, hire women, and actively groom them. Actively groom them. Whatever, that for every individual or corporation or institution is different. But whatever it is that you want to do, actively groom your women to move into higher echelons and become leaders. And once they become leaders, they become the feeding system for bringing in more women and minorities and increase the gender and diversity issues.
Kanika, I'll just jump in with my 2 bit because you said we're running out of time. I was recently on the jury for an entrepreneurship competition, and they projected women from tier 2, 3, 4 cities. And I was just amazed at the quality of the talent in these women entrepreneurs, very young, bubbling, passionate, very skilled. So I was just wondering whether the mentorship program that TIE has makes an effort to get these women as maybe even buddies or mentors to women in other cities, because I'm not sure how much of a reach they have in the places that they live in. Maybe that's one of the things that it can, it's specific to India, but just a thought from my side.
Wonderful. Wonderful pointers, ladies. I think it is a lot of food for thought for TIE. I just want to close by borrowing a quote from Mr. Amitabh Kant, who was here yesterday. And he said that the next disruption will come from women entrepreneurs. In my mind, I have no doubt about that, because TIE is building stories of creating bold and impactful entrepreneurs. And TIE Women is holding the baton for creating bold and impactful women entrepreneurs. And the journey continues. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kanika.
Bye.
Happy meeting everyone.
Thank you, Kanika, and thank you, Tai.